clever.
Right? Isn't that the cutest thing ever?
That's very you. No, it really is.
Yeah. Classic me.
Nice.
Yeah. I switched the music with Marc playing the we should teach him our theme.
I'll teach him the bass, the intro. It's fucking easy. And it's a really good exercise. That's all it was for me.
Huh.
Pretty much all of my riffs, I just developed as exercises, and then they all work as songs too. So. Yeah, sure, why not?
All right, we're live on the internet and here in Vancouver. I'm Marijuana Man. This is From Under the Influence. Welcome to the show. We're high atop the Marc Emery's Cannabis Culture Headquarters. Bunch of friends in the house. We got all sorts of new technology. We got multicam today. So we got Tommy Bong here on the board. Jeremiah's in the house. And we got lots of cameras. Let me see what camera we're using. Over here on the couch, we got Al the Alchemist.
What's happening?
The Kush Queens.
Hola.
She's not in between, but she's just not.
This time.
She's just not in between yet.
Exactly.
So yeah, another gorgeous day here in Vancouver. We got a bunch of friends over there. There's Jody's just come in.
Hey, what's happening, Jody?
And we're expecting Marc to join us too here in a little bit, we're hoping. So yeah, as everybody in the world has probably seen or heard, Marc is back in Vancouver and in our loving arms again, let me tell you.
Woohoo!
We put together a celebration on Sunday across the street in the park, Victory Square, I guess it's called, and a few hundreds of people showed up and all the media, and we had some music and speeches, and it was a grand day and wonderful to see his face. That's for sure.
It was a really good smoke down.
Oh, and everybody was thrilled too. The crowd was pumped, and yeah, it's good to see. I'm thrilled to be here, to be any part of it at all.
Same.
Right? Like,
Totally.
and how cool is it that we can put together something that fast across the street? All the staff, you know, we all carry shit over there, tents and microphones and amps, and
then boom, it's around.
And then it's a thing, and everybody is just so colorful and wonderful. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to be around this place and do the shit we do.
Well, you know, when cannabis gets legalized, what you guys could do is just offer yourself out as a service to set up protests for other causes. Yeah, we just got a protest happening in 5 minutes. Don't worry about it.
What are you protesting? I can help you. So yeah, we're broadcasting live on Pot TV. I think we're on Marijuana Man TV as well.
Nice.
I see some faces in the chat there. Good on you to be here. Glad to see you. That's pretty cool. I love that technology.
Yeah.
We got Janice and Fran sitting over there on the south couch, as we like to call it. And Vicky.
And Vicky. Oh,
The
Vicky,
South
you're so
Coast.
fun. You're so fun.
The
You
South
blow my
Coast,
mind.
yeah.
Hey, Vicky. Hey, Vicky.
We only have one Brian in the house. Our good friend from Saskatchewan's in the house. Jeff's here. Good to always have him around. And he's got a big crew with him today. So, yeah, thanks for being here. Last night was, and as you saw in the show opening, Marc was in the house for jam night.
Yeah, it was quite the honor to jam with Marc last night.
Oh, yeah, it was a thrill. And, you know, quite funny.
I'm not going to jam tonight.
A few of us pitched in and bought Marc a bass guitar and an amp. And then I naturally asked him if he was going to play on jam night. Oh, no, he said, You know, I haven't touched a guitar for 2.5 months. Rusty, whatever. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. And somebody asked him yesterday. No, not going to play. He has a documentarian following him around with a camera. He asked Jody for sure. He's not going to play. He said, no, not going to play. Jody told me that 2 seconds before he entered this room, he said he wasn't going to play, and then walked directly to the bass, picked it up, put it on, and began to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
So,
What's calling him?
a musician cannot not play,
yeah.
right? And we know that Marc is definitely a musician now. Hey, we got a delay.
There he is. Come on in and join us.
What's happening, brother?
Hey, Marc. How's it going?
You can,
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah. We
wires.
got it going on.
please join.
Thanks to Enrico.
Katrina.
You can sit down if you'd like.
All right.
Or you can sit here.
No, I'll sit beside the one with the legs.
No, you might. You might want to. Might want to give him.
A cornucopia of weed. No, we'll use this. All right.
Yeah, that's our usual supply for the show.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really cool. The table gets set up and we come in and there's just jars of weed there. I don't know who brings them. I don't know.
They're here every time I get here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And what's the theme of today's show?
Today's theme is smoke more weed because the boss is back.
Well, and not only that, these are good times for people who like to smoke a lot of weed because the price keeps coming down.
It really does.
And there's a great selection out there. And I was told I was out of date, Daddy-O, when I said there was 35 dispensaries. Somebody just said it's just under 50 now.
Oh, is that right?
50 dispensaries. I mean, there's one right beside my apartment. Connected to my apartment is a weed store. And I thought, and they've got a patio where you can smoke beside my apartment. I think that's so strange.
Yeah, it's exploded here, and wonderfully so.
Yeah.
Not many of them have gotten into a lot of difficulty because they were shady or, but a few.
So that's the biggest change really since I've been back. Everything is pretty much the same, except the marijuana whole industry has gotten more moneyed and sophisticated.
Yes.
And that's generally a very good thing. Like, in other words, there is more sophisticated dabbing devices. We got so many devices now. We've got, more subcultures. No, I'm not going to do. Oh, that's going to be
There's
good.
only flowers
Yeah,
in it.
okay.
It's not a dab.
Yeah.
The price of glass has skyrocketed, and that's become a viable, huge industry as well.
That's so nice. Yeah, there's a lot more money in equipment. There's a lot more money being raised by big companies for IPOs. There's more money being invested in tourism, marijuana tourism specific, and dispensaries. People are spending money on dispensaries. And so it's getting much more sophisticated quickly, even in a quasi-legal environment like this. And also, I wanted to point out that even though everybody lauds Colorado and Washington, you cannot have a vapor lounge anywhere. And it's strictly enforced. It's hard to have any kind of indoor kind of communal celebration going on in those legal states, whereas we've had this happening for 8 years straight now.
We don't need
12 to 16 hours a day marijuana consumption is going on.
We don't need no stinking rules.
Yeah.
Well, if you really were to rip the lid off the cannabis culture, you would see that, in fact, we don't need as many rules as they think that we do. The industry's pretty much in place already.
Generally speaking, the average cannabis user has enough common sense to govern themselves in an intelligent and compassionate manner.
Well, I believe that. Yeah,
and I really think, we don't need as much rules as they're trying to impose.
And that's going to become a bigger discussion because I'm pretty convinced we can make marijuana legal next October 19th, 2015.
I'm convinced of that as well.
That's legalization day in Canada, and it's our big opportunity as a culture to come out as a passionate voter bloc and make the Liberal Party of Canada the majority government. And then I would fully expect that within 3 to 6 months that government would legalize marijuana. And people don't understand how that would happen. At the federal level, it's very simple to legalize. You just withdraw it from the schedule. You take cannabis out of Schedule 1 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, and it's legal. But that also at that point allows the provinces to regulate. So each province is going to have their own regime. So we'll have, a lot of talk about having it like Colorado, where everybody can grow some plants in the backyard, and that, but we're already in a place in British Columbia where you can already have lounges. So you can't all of a sudden say lounges, should be illegal, because our social experiment shows that they work fine. We've had them for 8 years. There's no crime ever here. There hasn't been as much mayhem in our lounge every day of the year for 8 years as there is at one night over at the Canby.
No, that's
real.
exactly
One night at the
right.
Canby, there's people staggering in the gutters,
Oh, yeah.
pissing, and being disgusting and fighting and
Yeah.
pulling knives and getting drunk and trying to drive, we've never seen anything like that here.
Well, the last time any police did come through here, I'm not too sure if you're still around, but it was the regular beat cop showing the new guy around.
That was during the Olympics.
He pointed to the new guy and said, everybody in here is breaking the law. He said, but for some reason we let them. And I thought that was very encouraging, that at least he's passing that on to the new guy, and that was their
Well,
standard.
clearly that's become the policy, after 8 years. But this can't be done in Colorado. So at some point, it depends what kind of legalization we're going to get.
Yeah.
So hopefully in British Columbia, where the support for legalization is strongest, we'll have the most modernized regime.
I would like to think so.
Yeah, well, there's more sophistication. People are like on the government level, they're used to dealing with these problems and how to approach it. So Manitoba, they're going to be lost. Saskatchewan's they're going to be lost. They won't know how to approach this model.
So, do we get any questions from our listeners, viewers out there?
Well, we certainly can.
So encourage them to fire off questions that I'll answer for them. Seeing as how I haven't seen a microphone like outside of traditional media for 4.5 years. Anybody has any questions, fire them over here.
So
both networks, Marijuana Man TV and Pot TV.
Tom Mulcair came out today in the news. I don't know if you saw that, but he's criticizing the conservative marijuana stance. But he's also suggesting decrim with the police.
Well, yes, but what the great thing is what we hope to achieve by my arrival, my return. I like that when I said I have returned, tell Canadians I've returned, because now they're talking about our issue. They're all acknowledging that the only issue we really have an argument about is marijuana. So the NDP is upset because we used to send people to them to vote for them, but then they didn't follow through.
That's right.
And then Mulcair went backwards and became regressive. Wants a royal commission. Hey, been there, done that 45 years ago, and that one said we should decriminalize, which is the most you're willing to offer. That's a non-starter. That's going nowhere. But he has to answer because he knows they're going to lose a good chunk of their support to the Liberals if they don't at least appear progressive. And the Conservatives are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They know that 70% of Canada wants legal marijuana. They know that 50% of Albertans want legal marijuana. A majority of Conservatives want legal marijuana. But the base, the fundamentalist base, actually doesn't want it. They think it's a sin. Anything that makes you question God is a sin. So the Conservatives are playing a very oddball thing of trying to appear loyal to their base by being just totally anti-pot, but then open to the rest of Canada by modernizing the rules. They want to actually have it literally both ways.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see how that can be.
It should be
right?
interesting.
Where they tell the public, well, we're willing to modernize, which is decriminalize. But we tell our base that all marijuana use is vile and evil and we'll never, ever decrim. And somehow this can coexist in the same sphere.
Yeah. Somehow they're looking to confuse the constituent, I think.
They are. And the Liberal clarity is always going to win out over vagueness, as my belief, when it's a positive thing. And since marijuana legalization is viewed positively by 70% of people, they're going to go with the people offering the pure product.
That's right.
Right? And that's going to be the Liberal Party. So.
And you're going to be out there on the road making this an open.
Well, and explaining why they
straight-up
can't vote for the
discussion.
NDP, because all the NDP members are whipped into never saying the word legalization as long as Justin Trudeau is advocating it, because they don't want to lend credibility to his campaign. Well, to me, that's like saying, so you're willing to sacrifice us as supporters in order to maintain some illusion of what exactly? That you both have the same platform?
He doesn't know what to do.
Right? No, he doesn't.
He's
And he's
stuck
an
in the middle.
authoritarian by nature, so he's the kind of person that Thomas Mulcair doesn't want any member of the NDP caucus doing anything unless it's expressly approved by him.
Oh, is that right?
And he doesn't know what to think because he's just out of date. His personal view on marijuana is not in sync with the majority of the country, and that's a danger for any politician, right? But Stephen Harper has the same problem too. So everything points to Justin Trudeau benefiting by this greatly, and consequently us benefiting by it greatly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I predict a landslide victory.
Well, and let me let,
It's 420.
yeah, woo! Is it 420?
Can that be?
Really, is that late?
The question from the chat for you, Marc, is there's one here. It said, this is from the real Professor Ziggy in the chat.
Oh.
And he says, Marc, will you press for... Oh, it's just one way here. Hold on a second.
You remember Professor Ziggy?
Marc, will you press for full legalization, or will freedom-minded individuals be satisfied with GMO cannabis or GMO cannabis controlled by big tobacco and pharmaceuticals?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Marijuana is illegal now, and there's a jar of 25, there's like maybe 15 strains in front of me produced in an illegal environment. Well, if in a legal environment the pot's crap, we just go back to doing it the way we did in an illegal environment. So all legal means is that nobody goes to jail. It doesn't mean people stop growing, right? And so we don't have legalization until anybody can grow. At least, and I'm willing to compromise that you have to grow in a backyard or a shed or a greenhouse. I mean, if people are paranoid about you having a mega operation in your home, all right, we can grow it in a common garden, a public garden, your backyard, someone else's garden. As long as we can grow it somewhere safe. Yeah, you can ban people from growing in their houses if you want, but essentially we should all be able to produce cheap marijuana without any kind of dependency on anybody else.
When I was growing on the black market, we always found that Crown Land was the best place to grow.
Well, but there should be, but in a legal environment,
Nobody's farm is getting.
But see, a legal environment solves that problem
It really
of
does,
our
for
national
sure.
parks being used as grow ops. Right? Because if people can grow in their backyard, why would they trek into the boondocks to grow the same
Absolutely.
thing, right?
I've
So,
got
I'm going to advocate simply legalization, meaning nobody goes to jail. And I'm going to let all the other voters spend some effort maybe discussing what kind of legalization would look like. Because that's the discussion that's going to go on in all 13 provinces and territories.
For a long
And
time.
nobody is talking about it now because they don't understand how soon it's going to come. When Justin Trudeau takes over, he's going to have to stop arresting people for pot in a moratorium. He's going to have to tell his attorney general, well, listen, we promised legalization, but we can't really do it until we have the provinces all up to speed for 6, 7, 8 months maybe.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, we're going to have to stop arresting people. So that's the first thing, is that as soon as he's elected and takes office, he's got to have a moratorium on pot arrests.
Beautiful. That's nice.
You know, and then from there, he has discussions with the provinces about how they're going to regulate it when they take it out of the schedule, and that they know the date that'll happen so they have something ready, right?
Well, I hope that he consults his latest MP, Jody, when she gets elected, and that.
Yeah, well, we're going to go campaigning on Friday or Saturday in Vancouver East too. So anybody from Vancouver East will be on Main Street or Commercial Drive. With nice signs and a booth, all sort of signing up members of the Liberal Party to help Jody's campaign for that nomination.
That'll be fun for everyone. I wanted to address what Professor Ziggy said about GMO too. I have a theory about that. How because of prohibition, they forced us to hide the seeds away, hide them very deep, and I don't think that Monsanto can ever get a hold of it like they have with other seeds.
Listen, okay, I'm a dissenting voice. Yeah, Monsanto does some bad things, but only because government pays them to do it. Monsanto does a lot of great things too. I mean, they're a mega company that are working with farmers everywhere on earth. If they were a bad thing, farmers wouldn't work with them. Farmers like working with them because they spend more money on R&D and agriculture than anybody. Heck, probably all other sources combined. Monsanto is farming, and they spend every cent of their earnings on farming, right? But yeah, if a government comes along and says, we want you to kill this plant and we'll give you X amount of money, any company is going to do it. All companies are amoral by nature. Only individuals are moral. Companies take whatever people give them and pay for it, and they will do that for you. And it could be a good thing or a bad thing, you know. So, but my point being is that everything you eat is genetically modified. You know, your carrots aren't orange and sweet normally. That was done 90 years ago when people didn't want to eat the purple carrots and the white carrots that are actually natural, and you can buy them, but nobody wants them. Everybody wants the genetically modified carrot, which is orange, which is unnatural, I guess. And it tastes sweeter, but everybody likes orange carrots. And everything we eat meat-wise is all genetically modified. It was a wild cow until we domesticated. Now there's no such thing as a wild cow. So all the animals we eat have been domesticated and changed totally, and that's genetic modification too. If you change their environment enough and give everything to them without them having to search for it in the wild, you're genetically modifying. So now a cow wouldn't know how to be wild anymore. You put a cow out in a field and say, go for yourself, he's going to look at you and go, no. We've got 13,000 years together, man. You've been feeding me. You're going to keep feeding me, right? They have no idea of how to do that. So most of the foods we already eat are genetically modified. So this fear over somehow that what's been going on for all of agriculture is going to somehow be a harmful thing if we talk about it is ridiculous. There's nothing inherently wrong with genetic modification of foods. Now, nicotine-based pesticides or herbicides that kill bees, that's a real concern. And those things should be banned. They're not essential to life. So we should definitely stop anything that's killing the bees. But as to the idea that all genetically modified plants are bad, no. Pot's been genetically modified like crazy, but not with technology, with just breeding technique. But breeding technique is modification. I mean, and it is genetic. The way you cultivate something's going to influence the future generations that come from those plants. So we're always genetically modifying everything. Heck, we're going to be genetically modified soon with computer chips absorbing everything so we can live beyond our normal lifespan.
Yeah.
We're going to be the most genetically modified thing ever produced on Earth once we start looking at our DNA and starting to take out our cancer gene and stuff like that. So genetic modification is a good thing. It just depends if you're evil or if you're good. Everything you do with knowledge, if you're good, is going to turn out okay. And if you're a bad person, you're going to do bad things, right? So that I guess that's why people fear. When I hear Monsanto being dissed, I got to remind people Monsanto does a lot of great things, but nobody. That's just between them and the farmers. We hear about the things we don't like, but those things are all paid for with your very tax money. So you're ultimately paying for all the Colombian cocaine fields to be eradicated because that money came from the United States government, which came from taxation, which comes from us. Yeah. So that old phrase, we have met the enemy and he is us, is very accurate. All these things that go on in the Middle East from Gaza are all paid for with our tax money. Absolutely. Because 10% of all the weapons used in the Middle East are made in Canada. So, and those businesses don't exist without your tax money
10%.
Because only governments can afford wars. Nobody else, there are very few people starting their own war just because they got a lot of billions of dollars they want to burn up overnight, in rockets and weapons, right? That comes from our tax money. Absolutely. So when you find out all the bogeymen in existence, they're really us. Yeah. If you don't like genetic modification, you should hate yourself. And if you don't like if you don't like war, you should also hate yourself because you're paying for both those every day. Both. Yeah. Right? And living and taking advantage of that society that it creates. So lots of time to reflect in prison, I see you notice.
Well, before you came in, we were talking about last night's jam and how
I played 3 notes. I played A, G, and F, and then an open E.
That's 4 notes.
And we have it all. It's all.
And the thing is, it felt very comfortable. It was nice to hold that bass guitar. It felt like home again, right? I mean, when I was in prison, I always felt great when I held that instrument. I remember one time 2 or 3 times I was really, really sick. Went in, played the guitar, did a great job, walked out and felt terribly sick right away again. But for the 2 hours I was playing, I felt wonderful, perfectly revitalized, totally without any malaise whatsoever. So I'm going to start working on some songs this week, and I'll try and get back into the groove where I know like a good 50 to 100 of them.
Are we doing Stormy Monday next Tuesday?
Yeah, okay, I'll get Stormy Monday ready.
At least with Sean, we'll do Stormy
Monday. Who's doing Stormy Monday?
Sean is going to sing. You'll play bass.
Oh, okay.
I'll do some rhythm. Adam can lead, and any drummer in the house can sit in.
All right.
Yeah.
Jeremiah.
It was fun.
Jeremiah's a drummer. You know that?
Yeah. He's looking forward to playing. So. Yeah, we could have some strange stuff going on.
Well, it was a real blast for us all to see you play. We heard, on the outside here that you were learning bass and how much fun you were having with it and how well it was
It's
going.
It's great being in a rock and roll band.
Yeah, it was. It was really fun to see.
My fantasy was playing. We did 14 concerts. How much fun would it be if there were women in the audience? right? Because I played 14 concerts, but in fact, the only women watching were guards, and the only consequence of that was not underwear being thrown to the stage, but in fact, we weren't allowed to play "Hey Joe" by Jimi Hendrix because it was anti-female, according to her. So she felt a little unthreatened by that. Bunch of inmates playing, got shot my woman, and I guess she said I don't think inmates should be allowed to say that, right? And fair enough, fair enough. So no "Hey Joe" by Jimi Hendrix on a few shows.
Who would think, the rules that they had come up with?
Well, you couldn't swear during a rap number, and guys would try. Like when I say swear, how should I say unedited language, right? Typical hip hop language. Well, if you did that, you lost your band slot, you lost your practice, you were gone. You were an unperson in the music. So you have to be careful about some things, but we played a lot of songs that derided police or "I Shot the Sheriff" by Bob Marley. Now I thought if you say in a prison "I shot the sheriff," that would, if I were them, if you make me feel these are all badass dudes, hardcore. Like yeah, okay, they did drug offenses, but they were covered in tattoos. To me, they look like this is just what you see on TV, right? But they were nice to me. But if maybe 5 or 6 guys were singing "I Shot the Sheriff" and a whole bunch of inmates joined in, that would be disconcerting for
I guess
people who
so.
work there,
For all the sheriffs that were in there.
Anyway, any more questions on it? We got anybody else? Oh, every Thursday. Thursday was our band slot. It went from 5:15 to 8 o'clock, and it was 3 hours of heaven. But because I spent all week practicing on a big acoustic bass, and there are these big unwieldy things, and so you're going, and it's all the sound comes out of the box, right? So it's big. So when I got in the studio and it's an electric carbon, like a rock and roll bass guitar, that felt like Liberation Day, So
you must have had wicked hand strength. When acoustic bass is, it's a good way to build your finger
okay.
strength.
Well, that's the 6 out of 7 days with that.
Yeah. You build.
No,
you
so
build really
it was
good finger strength.
but the studio was remarkable. Like the prisons I'd been to up to them were all horrible, including the ones most Canadians are sent to in the United States. We're sent to immigrant prisons, and they're prisons for non-Americans where they don't spend any money on anybody. There's nothing there. They're in the worst places, and they're all run by privately owned companies. Most Canadians end in that. And I was in one for 5 months, and I hated it so much that newspapers started republishing what I was saying, and the company that owned it thought this was such a bad publicity thing that they asked the BOP to move me to one of their facilities. So when I got to a facility run by the Bureau of Prisons for Americans, I was the only Canadian there, and then they had all these great guitars, like 25 guitars, and then a fully amplified electric studio. It was like, wow, this is incredible, right? So... Is that going to be for me?
The Polaroid.
Okay. Anyway, I really love being in the band. I learned 120 songs, and hopefully next Tuesday I will be comfortable enough and we'll play a couple.
That'd be awesome.
But I don't know how to jam because I don't know how to do scales or
Well, no,
leave
you know what? With jamming with Adam is so easy because he'll just yell the changes to you.
Okay, that's good too.
It's like,
that's
hey.
what even though I was the leader of the band, that's what the other guys would do. When they were teaching me a Sioux song, they said, "Mark, it's easy. It's just like A, G, F. We'll come around and then I'll give you a walk down and then okay. So he said, so just watch me or I'll yell out D, C, and then A. Yeah.
And that's all, and that's the way Adam
And Adam's
leads the jam.
obviously
and by doing
that.
he's able to encourage musicians that wouldn't normally be comfortable to get up in that setting, and really they end up really excelling quite quickly because they're exposed to the jamming environment.
Yeah, I should learn my scales so I can play within those scales too. Right?
So your band at one time, didn't you guys all get thrown in solitary?
Yes, we did. Because one day, and this is what, I was a good opportunist in prison. And one day we could only take pictures with just our uniform and nothing else. But one day I said to the photographer, so if we brought a guitar in, could we pose with our guitar? And he said, if you can get the head of rec to approve it, then I'll take it, right? And everybody needs somebody to go back to. And so we went to the guy in charge of rec, who was generally not a very... I didn't like him. He was insincere, let's put it that way. But he was in charge of the rec area. And I said, can we have pictures with our guitar taken? And he says, yeah. So we go and take some pictures, right? And a week or two goes by, And we go up to him and we say, so could we have the photographer take pictures of our band, which had never happened before? And he said, well, I don't see why not. And then there was a big discussion between him and two or three others. And they said, okay. Now, I knew this wouldn't last. I knew something was going to go wrong. So I immediately went to SIS, which is Safety Internal Security, or something like Security Internal. Anyway, they're the cops who look after anything that's going on. So when there's gang activity, they want to know about it. They're like undercover within the prison, right? But to get a picture of a group, of any kind of group, more than one person, you have to get their permission. So I put all 5 members, and I said we want pictures of our band together, and and we asked permission, and they approved it. So then we went to the head of music, head of photography, and head of the recreation. 3 correctional officers, they're prison guards, but we call them COs, correctional officer. Yeah. And then the photographer himself, I gave $20 in stamps because I said, listen, I appreciate this so much. These pictures mean so much to me. Here's $20, right? Because I want him to do a good job because I know this isn't going to last, right? So he comes in and he takes 30 some odd pictures, right? And I've got $31 photo coupons I bought at the commissary. And then they come back, and we're not allowed to actually own any pictures of a group taken in the prison. So we took him to Mr. Anderson, and he mailed them back to Jody, right, which is what the procedure is. So I never touched him. Yeah. And they were sent to Jody. She puts them on Facebook, and then we even have another set done. I'm thinking, this was awesome. So so then I get more coupons, give him more money, I get more permission. And I'm going around, and we take a second bunch of pictures, and they're awesome, and they're about to come back, and 3 weeks goes by, and then all of a sudden I'm put in solitary, like instantly, called to the lieutenant's office, and without explanation put in solitary. And apparently one of those photographs, and so all the other members of the band went to solitary. And I found out right away when he interviewed me 3 or 4 hours of waiting in a cell. He came to me and says, you have a rock and roll band here? I said, yeah. He said, did you have pictures taken of that band? I said, of course. And they said, oh, okay. And did you use a smartphone or something? I said, no, those were authorized by you. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're SIS. You're here interrogating me. But I got permission from you for those pictures. You just check your records. Someone from your department signed it. And he goes, okay, well, I'll definitely research that. And I said, and furthermore, 4 other people signed that, and you can just talk to them right now. Like, Mr. Anderson's working right now. He's my boss. You call him up, and he'll say, yeah, I authorized those photographs. And I know Mr. Staley's head of recreation. And then that's when they said, well, Mr. Staley said he knew nothing about it. I go, what? Oh, really? His signature's on it. And I said, so what happened? I said, did someone from Washington? Yeah, someone from Washington did see pictures of your band in a newspaper in Canada and wanted to know how that photograph was taken, because typically we also looked like we were having a good time, and prisoners aren't supposed to have a good time. They're not supposed to be seen in a newspaper having a good time. Right. And they're not, and rock and roll looked like a luxury to them. So, right. So that's when they called the prison and say, how was this done? And if it was done with authorization, I want to talk to the people who let it happen. And that's why all of a sudden that guy knew nothing about it, because he was a... So then I get put in solitary, and we all get put in for 8 days. Jody complains quite vociferously. She comes down there, and it costs her a lot of money to visit me in solitary for an hour or two. And then she gets pretty upset because she knows these pictures are taken legitimately. Yeah. She's dumbfounded that we're in solitary for pictures that she knows every 5 people in the place authorized, but nobody's. So anyway, the fellow said, well, normally our investigations take weeks and months, but maybe yours will only take weeks. He said, I'll try and move it along. So sure enough, after 8 days, we're all let out, and they don't apologize or anything. No. They just say your story checks out, and that's it, right? So that's one of the reasons I went to solitary. All the reasons I went to solitary were misunderstandings. But you can go to solitary for investigation, and investigations take as long as they need to take. Right. So you're always screwed in a way. So it's best to just try and suck up and get along. And I would never advise anybody criticize any CO or they always, a lot of their militant guys say, write paper on them. No, don't write anything negative about them at all. No. That will turn out to be very bad. And it works. You got to suck up, get along, be nice, and you'll be out of there quicker and faster. And
Now, I've heard you say a few times recently, and a lot of times.
Like anybody can survive 8 days in solitary. Yeah. Needless to say, the worst parts are that I can't call Jody and tell her why I'm in solitary. Yes. I have no email to send her any kind of notice. I'm only going to get one 10-minute phone call in the next month if I don't get out of here. And if you're not home at that exact moment, that's it. You lose, right? So solitary, you get used to it, but it's worse if you're like me that actually has like a life on the other side that you're in contact with daily. Then it really is like noticeable because all you get is mail, and eventually I would get a lot of mail, but it's just you're just coping until they see reason and let you out.
Let you out. Well, that's pretty notorious rock and roll band. I think you got in prison.
No, that's good. I'm
This is
glad
some,
to say I went to the hole for my band.
Yeah, this
right?
is some Johnny.
Courtney can call her band Hole, but I went to the hole for my band. So
That's some Johnny Cash kind of shit.
yeah. So those things are fun, but like, and the funny thing is, here's the amusing tale I have is that everybody was nice to me, but the guy who taught me bass, who invited me to be in his band, he had like the words "white power" up his arm, right? Beautifully, sensitively tattooed, massive Gothic script, white power, and then a big swastika up here. But the funny thing about that is, a guy like me coming and seeing that, just thinking, well, that's pretty heavy. I mean, advertising your
You are in
Nazi
prison, though,
Nazi belief right there where everybody can see it, and then white pride and a few other like Germanic type symbols and stuff. And yet, I never heard him say anything really negative about anybody, right? And he took to me for no particular reason other than he. A lot of guys will appreciate people even have a civilized attitude towards things in a prison. But anyway, I never heard him say that. So eventually I got up the nerve to ask him, what's that all about? And he says, oh, I've been inside 30 years when I was young. He said, but now I'm just trying to get along with everybody so I can get out in 8 years. And I just want to get out. I don't want trouble of any kind.
30
And
years. Holy fuck.
and he was very old school. Like he'd only seen the outside 6 months in the last 30 years.
Oh my God.
And so those kind of guys tend to get in their early years when you're looking at a long time and you figure I'm never getting out or something like that. You put all sorts of stuff. I met lots of guys that said I wish I didn't have these tattoos on. Like I got those done like 20, 30 years ago because I've definitely seen more tattoos in my jail time than all the universes I could ever be in on the outside, possibly.
So you roamed around pretty much as a gang of one, did you?
Well,
In most
everybody
cases?
was. It was like when I was a tourist abroad. When I was in India, there was a race riot going on, and they were knifing each other, and we were cowered in a corner, frightened. And people stopped and said, "No, don't you be frightened. We know you're not involved. Everybody loves you. So you just walk right through, and everybody will stop what they're doing, fighting with each other, and they'll let you go, and then you're fine." And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Everybody said, "Oh, the tourists, stop," or the white people, or the white family, because I had my children with me, and they'd never seen white children before. So everybody stopped everything while we walked through. So anyway, I'm not sure where that was going. That was just I don't know where that story was going. But no, it's like if you're a
You
total
being a
babe
gang-
in the woods.
Being a gang of one.
Yeah, I'm a guy of one, and so none of them have really ever known a Canadian, white, black, or other,
Okay.
right? So a lot of them thought it was interesting that I'm that Canadian because they'd seen me on TV, and that they thought they wondered if all Canadians were like me. And I always said, well, we're all polite. We're all polite. And I said, and there are a lot of great comedians. I wasn't a particularly funny guy, but so anyway, everybody treated me really nice, including even big, tough dudes, big, tall guys with lots of tattoos or whatever. And there are lots of people there for violent crimes. Like my band was made up of a guy who'd shot someone 7 times. Great singer. Had a good story. Had a good story about why he needed to shoot someone 7 times. And allegedly my drummer was there for drug charges. Fabulous drummer and a really wonderful guy. But last I heard, he got caught in a shootout. So the way I knew them was like nice people. But if I went and checked all the people I thought were nice people and looked up their crimes, there's definitely some violence there. One of the guys in my band, wonderful guy, really, a little on the angry side sometimes. They end up calling him Angry John, but he was there because his meth lab blew up, and he really only hurt himself. But you get charged for arson. Now, fortunately, the drug evidence is destroyed, so you don't necessarily get a drug charge, which could be less. Could be a lot less, actually. So,
Really?
Anyway, but I still like them all, so I don't know if it's like a bad thing to admit that in my time, some people who are bad on the outside, and we would call them bad people or criminals, can behave surprisingly civilized under adverse conditions, and most of them are looking forward to getting out. Everybody who's in a band is certainly more reform-minded than others, because when you play an instrument well enough that people would pay you, why would you want to be in jail for anything, right? But most people who play music also play in bars, and there's substance abuse gone rampant going in every bar because you can buy lots of drugs in bars. You can certainly get alcohol in bars. People smoke cigarettes in lots of bars. So every possible bad drug influence is all in one place, and then they put a nice musician in there just to make sure, you're totally taken in, use the musician as the bait, right? Use the bait while we get them addicted to. I probably thought about things too much while I was gone. I don't know.
So you got quite masterful at your food intake too, and finding good food.
Well, I was grateful to all the people who stole. See, that's the thing. I relied on criminals in the jail because they won't give you good food. And so I needed to get things like an onion or a bell pepper. And I tried to eat a vegetable every day, and I tried to eat a fruit every day. And so guys would routinely just take apples that not see whenever you're given your food in the chow hall, you have to eat it right away or you don't get to take it out. No takeout food. Eat or you don't eat. So a lot of guys wouldn't eat their apples or their bananas and stuff, and guys would collect them up and then they would sell. I looked around like that's a typical move, right? And then they would sell them to me for 50 cents each. The fruit was cheap. Well, actually, that kind of fruit. I would pay $5 for a cantaloupe. It was uncut.
Wow.
50 cents for apples and bananas. They stopped allowing us to have grapefruits or oranges because they claimed too many guys made hooch with it. And in my experience in prison, men who want to drink alcohol can make it out of anything.
Ketchup.
Oh, gee, you've got some extra tire rubber there. Let's put that tire rubber in.
Anything that has
oh,
sugar.
boy.
Anything that has
That's
sugar.
right. And of course, everything has sugar. Potatoes have sugar. Corn chips have sugar. I mean, it got scary what had sugar in it, right?
Hooch,
Yeah,
right?
ketchup. Use ketchup had sugar.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
big
give me a
one
load
in
of that
Manitoba.
stuff. And people, but the most expensive drug in prison, without question, was tobacco.
Yeah.
One cigarette was $25, and I said, no. You've got that wrong, right? You mean a whole pack of cigarettes for $25? No. One cigarette is $25. I said, well, who would pay that? Well, what you do, they said, is you cut it in 5, and each little spit that makes enough to have a smoke is $5. I said, $5?
Wow.
$5 in prison money? That could get my cell cleaned every week for like a month, or something like that. $5 goes far in prison. But marijuana was only marked up by 3 times. Tobacco was marked up by like 40 times. There's a reason for that. Were you going to ask me why that was, do you think? Because the punishment for marijuana was so draconian and severe. Like, if you were caught with marijuana, you could get charged federally again, get 6 months to 2 years added onto your sentence. You'd lose 47 days of good time. You'd go to the hole for 3 to 6 months. You wouldn't be able to buy anything from commissary when you got out. Your visits would be canceled for a year. And then after all that, you'd get transferred in a disciplinary transfer, which is like a lot of driving on buses with handcuffs and leg irons and going through that. That happened to me a couple of times. And anyway, it's because there was no punishment to tobacco. Tobacco was contraband, but they really would just take it away from you. So the demand was high and the punishment was low, so that means the price is high. With pot, the demand was modest because the punishment was so severe. I wouldn't touch it. I said, no way. Nothing. Getting high couldn't possibly be as rewarding as it is nerve-wracking thinking of any possible penalty I would get in this environment, right? Because, it's one thing in the real world to get a $500 fine. It's an entirely different thing to say, oh, for 6 months you're not going to see anybody in your cell ever except one guy, right? One person could drive you nuts in a cell after 3 to 6 months if you don't get out, right? So, that to me is a severe punishment going to the hole. But it still happened to me. And one of them was because they thought I smuggled in a smartphone, but I didn't. And so after 8 months, 8 days, I was released.
So money now, you say it's $5 is like that cash.
Onions are $5, green peppers $5, tomatoes were $2 to $3. A bag of broccoli was $7 to $10.
But you didn't have cash to trade.
No, what you do for that is, for example, there's a store in every unit. And our unit had a really good store, a guy you could buy anything from. And basically the price was twice what he paid for it at the commissary. You would give him in unused postage stamps. Because we could buy $10 in postage stamps every week, right? And so unused postage stamps become the currency. Theoretically, you could use those to send letters out. And I did. I sent more mail out than anybody. And so I would use them. But they get pretty worn after a while. right? So, and there's no real central bank to take them in. So over time, you get some really ratty stamps that you're looking at, and that's worth $1, right? And so there's money. You're not allowed as an inmate to give another inmate anything. You're not allowed to possess anything that you weren't given by them. So you're breaking a million rules by even having a currency. You're not allowed to buy things. You're not allowed to sell things. You're not allowed to have things, right? But you can sort of get anything. You could even buy sex if you really wanted to, with allegedly one of the females. And now I happen to know someone who told me in conference that he had done this, and I was pretty surprised because I don't think I could get an erection in a prison. Just the thought of it all is too freaky for me, right? Just having sex with the CEO. I mean, but I was only there for 5 years. I was at the low end of the scale. Most guys are there 10, 15, 20, 30 life imprisonment.
Brutal.
Like they're not. Brutal. I mean, I helped write some commutation applications and some clemency for some of the lifers because they're going to try and get people out of the prisons who've done too long. That's good, right? And there's a 2-point reduction, and other great things are going on to reduce the prison population. But I mean, these guys are sentenced to more time than you get anywhere else in the world. Like crazy stuff. 30 years for meth. Like, I mean, yeah, meth might be terrible, but 30 years, really? Yeah. Like, wow, that's like brutal. Medieval punishment.
Yeah. And lots of it.
Yeah, and it costs the taxpayer a lot of money for no real good. Like, if you just let the guy get his meth legally and there was no need for anybody to be engaged in criminal activity, you solve all your problems all at once, right? So it's so obvious. Why would you spend millions of dollars to incarcerate this guy and make it rough on his family? The guy knows 10, 20 family members are all going to be anguished over him going to jail, too.
It only ever comes down to the wrong people
anyway,
getting paid.
But I had a better prison experience than most, so I'm really grateful.
Well, it really feels to me like it hasn't changed you too much.
Some people kept saying, well, it'll take time. Well, no, I don't think it will. No. I'm always very much in the present moment anyway, even when I was here. Yeah. You have to be in the present moment to look at going and getting arrested 28 times. I mean, no, I got arrested. I looked over 50 times. I only got arrested 28 times and jailed 23 times. So you better be in the present moment if you're going to do stuff like that. So going to jail for 5 years, well, that's the price I pay. It's not like I didn't think they weren't going to do something eventually, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I would officially like to say thank you for saving my ass from going to jail.
Yeah. That was sweet. It was sweet to be able to take a plea, and then part of the deal was that you got probation. I did like that. It has that sense of nobility that I like to think of myself.
You know what we refer to that as?
And
fucking solid.
Yeah.
Seriously, fucking solid.
And I was grateful Michelle didn't have to deal with anything beyond what she dealt with. So that was good too.
So I wore this T-shirt today in the honor of that.
Yeah.
No extradition, and the extradition that's done. So yeah,
of the things I was able to do from prison, one of the nicest things, if you can say it like that, was calling up for the event for Michelle after she passed away from cancer, and being a great activist and my closest cohort for many, many years.
Yeah.
When I called in and was able to, the eulogy and tribute, I was able to get the phone time and just time it in and talk about something. People often talk about how wise or hard. Michelle was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed talking about how much fun she made life being hanging around me, and how it was just an awesome time.
Always very bubbly. And, it was a blast.
And that was during my big arrest period, because while Michelle was around, I think I probably got arrested at least like 20 out of those 23 times, right? So she had to be on hand to watch me get arrested all the time and make sure things were going well.
The very first thing I ever did with you in this world was you got arrested that day.
Yeah. So. And most of it's come to good fruition. Standing up for Sunday shopping, standing up for the right of rap music to be uncensored and distributed, and books and magazines about pot and medical marijuana and all the things we've given money to and stood for and gone to jail for. And
much of it has to do with your fortitude to continue. Right? It's one thing to step up and do stuff, get snapped down, but go away. You never went away. right? You always were prepared to come back and do it
Well,
again.
not only was it like the novel of my life I've always imagined. So to me, going to jail it has redemptive, useful things, right? It plays into my own narrative. Let me put it like that. I realize I see myself in a heroic sense, and that's probably arrogant or something. But if you're going to go to jail, you better see yourself in a heroic sense, because what are you going to do when you get depressed? I mean, you got to keep yourself busy in a dark room with nobody else to keep you company. So you better have a good feeling
Better
about
be
yourself,
arrogant.
because that's who you're going to be conversing with in the dark a lot of the time, right? Man, like, wow, I guess I asked for this, but So I have a heroic self-image. Oh, sorry. A heroic self-image for me is like really helped me out, and yet at the same time, the narrative is going just like could have possibly imagined it, right? And in fact, I just quoted what somebody often said to me, and I love that line in the movies too. Strike me down, Darth, and you'll make me more powerful than you can possibly imagine, right? And of course, the evil guy says, "Screw you," and kills him, right? But then all of a sudden, I think the DEA is thinking, how did that work out, that Emory persecution thing?
Yeah.
I mean, the quote was a significant blow to the legalization movement and the legalization of marijuana. So that didn't happen. So basically, how did that work out for you, DEA?
Yeah.
So
I guarantee it's a how not to handle.
and for that
things
matter, how did that work out for you,
instruction now.
Justice Department sending me away? It stalled the inevitable, but now the inevitable is coming, and it's coming to Canada. I cannot abide by Alaska and Washington and Oregon and Colorado and Washington, D.C. My God, the Antichrist is going to have legal marijuana before Canada. That's hard to take, so we've really got to make sure next year is our year.
Yes.
And getting everybody to vote. I'm not ashamed to say, but I'm a little embarrassed to say that in previous elections, I have even gone to my own staff and they did not vote. And they had a blank look in their face when I asked them why they didn't vote, right? Because, first of all, it's not in a lot of young people's radar, paradigm, life plan, or whatever it is, right? It happens so infrequently. What good would it do? Why should I care?
Yeah.
They're all a bunch of crooks, and all of which may be true. But in this case, think of your own self-interest. Visualize what it's going to be like to have a legal environment where we can have all this R&D on medical marijuana. We can find out all the great stuff it does, how it affects THC brain cells. I'm interested in anything that stops me from aging. So if marijuana can really stop people from Alzheimer's, then we should all have every old person smoking their ass off, right? And all these great things will happen when legalization occurs, and people can do research and do all the wonderful things, and we can try all the different strains we want and find out what's right for us, and everybody will be happy. Government will collect tons of taxes. We'll have a lot of tourists here. Wherever you have marijuana in the population, you have a very creative population, musically, theater, film. Wherever you don't have much marijuana, like in places in the world where there's not much marijuana, you don't have much creativity, and the nation reflects that, right? Really creative cultures have allowed hashish and marijuana to flourish.
And much less mayhem.
Yes. So all these things, we have to think of our own self-interest next year and think that if October 19th is legalization day, can we really afford not to show up? I mean, every last one of us. You don't need to know anything else about politics. You don't need to know a thing other than whatever that liberal candidate is, you vote for that one. Just this time.
Just this
time.
That's right.
But if they legalize pot, we could be we're loyal to them for generations. Just like the ANC still gets the vote of most South Africans because they ended apartheid 25 years ago, but people are still voting for them. So, I think the Liberals will reap that great benefit from a very grateful public, because everybody's going to like legalization of marijuana.
Absolutely.
Everybody will be used to it very quickly. Within 70% already agree with it, and they're ready for it. And the other 30%, they'll accept it because they'll see the benefit: reduced costs, reduced social costs, less police surveillance, less police arrests, less young people with criminal records. All these great things happen, all this good science going on, properly licensed shops, everything labeled, so many great strains to get for whatever different reasons. Everybody's going to see the sense in it. Within 5 years after legalization, people will wonder what we ever talked about. Why was there a problem? What was the discussion? And worse comes worse, and as I tell prohibitionists, hey, if it doesn't work out, we can just go back to your model, right? But we never will, and we will never will. No one's going to go back to prohibition once they've experienced legalization. That never happens. People always want freedom. That's our natural human impulse. No, shackle us down, take away our rights. Let's see how we like that. Then give us freedom, and we'll go back to the other way. No, we're not going to do that. Nobody does that. No rational, sane people do that. And we're not going to do it. Anyway, that's only 14 months away, so it's exciting. I've got a lot to look forward to, and I'm really pleased with how the moment I arrived, we kicked off our campaign, and now we're the dominant news story going on. Marijuana as the election focus for the next 14 months. And I think this is awesome that that's possible, that we can make them pay attention to our issue. Whatever it is that conservatives and liberals and NDP want to talk about, they're going to talk about marijuana from now till next October. And this is their fear, and this is their fate. Because that's a lot of time to get Canadians saying, okay, once and for all, let's just do this, get this done. How bad can Trudeau be? They can think compared to what, Mulcair, another authoritarian like Harper, or Harper who's a proven demon, right? So what really is the alternative here? You're not going to give this guy one chance and we can get marijuana. No, you're going to vote for this guy, and he's going to win. The Liberals are going to win in the cities. They're going to win in Quebec. They're going to win in Atlantic Canada. They're going to win in Ontario, and they're certainly going to win big in BC. And there doesn't matter what Alberta does. But if I were Alberta, I'd be thinking I'd want somebody in that next government.
Well, yeah, I'm thrilled.
So I think we can get a real liberal wave going, specific to our issue, and then we just have to make sure it's the legalization we want. That's for real and genuine and what have you. So we do have some work after the election, but that's if he gets elected, it's going to happen. And the United States, I predict, would legalize federally within a year, because at a certain point, the United States government is all about pragmatic realism. Where's the money going to go, right? And if Canada's going to legalize, and Uruguay's going to legalize, and Mexico wants to legalize, and you've got 5 states legalized, at some point you're just, there's no gain to be made by resisting that way.
Or at least down schedule. Put it.
No, that won't be enough anymore, because the states are outstripping the federal government so fast.
Well, true enough.
Right? I mean, you had 235 Congress people already vote successfully to order the Justice Department not to interfere with medical marijuana states. Well, there's 20 some odd of those in Florida coming on, and that's pretty huge. You got 235, and yet in Canada they never talk about it. No politician wants to talk about marijuana, but every state legislator in America, in every state, is going to Colorado to check it out, find out what's going on, find out what the revenue situation really is, find out what the public safety situation really is. And state legislators are coming back saying, not only did I check it out, I smoked some marijuana too, since it's legal there, right? And so they're coming back with this experience, and I didn't see anybody having a bad time, right? I mean, it's like if you go to the Cambie on a Friday night and you had the power to make alcohol legal or illegal, you would really be torn. You'd be like, oh, either decision is a bad one. Right? If I let them drink, they destroy themselves. But if I don't let them drink, they destroy themselves with worse stuff. So it's like we're between a rock and a hard place. And cannabis is the exact opposite. Even the illegal environment really has never been as bad as they painted it to be. It used to be, until the cops started coming down heavy, that I never saw much organized crime in growing pot. That was all done by friends and family and people in all the small areas around, British Columbia. Heck, there were whole towns like near Salmon Arm or Slocum Valley, where everybody grew pot. Everybody in the whole community. Nelson was like that. Everybody grew pot. Organized crime wasn't a factor, because everybody was growing, and that was cool. And then when the cops started getting heavy in the late 90s, and it's been a slow 15 years of persecuting all the outdoor growers, to the degree that regular people don't do it now because they'll get their property forfeited, and the government will take away their stuff, right? So that just throws it to the hands of organized crime, who are smart enough to only keep cash around. And cash is the most easily hidden commodity you could hide. It's hard to hide land. You got to have a deed for that. They can find your land, they can find your home, and they can find your car. But, a briefcase full of cash, as I know from hanging around criminals for 5 years, can be concealed in all sorts of places for a long time. Especially if you were like me, or like somebody, talk to bank robbers a lot, because bank robbers are fascinating, right? They never just rob one bank. I was like, well, why wouldn't you stop after 3? They just keep robbing banks until they get caught, right? Because none of them told me, oh, I retired, and they found me 10 minutes later. No, you got caught in your last job, right? And so, and they were usually had drug problems, and they're very desperate for some reason. And then I think that what they weren't telling me was it was kind of thrilling to rob a bank and get away with it. I think it was like the rush they were getting. A lot of those got on methamphetamine. and I think they like meth for the rush you get, that really speedy, crazy, irrational, frenetic rush,
Yeah.
and that the only thing that could kind of give them that kind of satisfaction on the drug was, like in a lot of cases, stealing a car locally is the reason they catch a lot of people here on methamphetamine, stealing cars and then crashing them, right? And these guys had kind of the same kind of weird death wish too. Go into a bank with a weapon, and and start a confrontation over money. So they got long sentences, but I couldn't be sympathetic to that. Like one guy was there for 45 years, and I'd go, "Oh wow, 45 years," but I didn't say that's too bad. No, you robbed 30 fucking places, man. Come on. So I mean, America's going to throw the book at anybody like that. In fact, they throw the book at everybody for everything. There are no short sentences in America anymore. It's so bizarre.
No. Well, I'm glad you're long away from that now. Eh? But
I would tell you, here's the thing. The real world is tougher than jail in one key way, especially for a person, not so much me, but like me, is that everybody's real respectful in prison. Nobody says shit they can't back up. Because if you can't back it up, you will get clobbered.
Yeah.
Right? And then there will be a big problem, because if you get clobbered and you have friends, those friends are going to have to back you up, and there's going to be a big confrontation. Right. And when the warden even sees anything like that, any kind of interracial problem, everybody's locked in their cell and nobody gets out, and it could be for a long time until he's absolutely certain that nobody's going to do anything, right? So it tends to be the opposite in prison. If you nudge someone by accident, the big dude will apologize. Sorry, didn't mean anything by that, And everybody's real nice. So it's like, it's a very polite society. Very polite society, very respectful society. Like I say, you could get yourself and a lot of other people in trouble if you don't watch yourself. And it's easy to have a misunderstanding in prison with a lot of different races, ethnic backgrounds, and some people with a chip on their shoulder, right? So, but for me, everybody was nice to me.
That's wonderful to know.
Yeah, and they went out of their way to show me stuff, like to teach me how to play bass guitar and invite me into a band I had no right ever being, in, which was that incredibly good band with great musicians. But then, they were kind of intrigued by me too, right?
Of course.
And being the only Canadian there, you're almost a zoo object in some way. And being the Prince of Pot, because my nickname was Prince. Everybody in prison has a nickname. They would either call me Canada or Prince. So I knew when they were trying to get hold of me. And stuff like that, so. The band was called Yazoo. And I like the name Yazoo. First of all, not a single Canadian would know what that means. So that's kind of a cool name, right? Well, and Yaz's great song was Situation. That's their great song. But Yazoo, where I was actually a famous place musically.
Yeah.
It's called the Yazoo, Mississippi Delta. And it's later mostly called the Delta in the South. If you're from Mississippi and you say you're from the Delta, everybody knows where you're from. You're from the area between Memphis, Tennessee, and Vicksburg in Mississippi, Clarksdale in the sort of end of the alluvial plain that comes off the Mississippi, and then all that area. That was all famous cotton country. It's where Muddy Waters is from. It's where Big Bill Broonzy was from. It's where Buddy Guy is from. It's where Robert Johnson is from, the king of the blues. So a great musical legacy there. But you can tell the place fell apart after the Great Flood of 1927. Well, I can, because I read a big book on it. But because the place has been depopulated ever since. The big flood flooded everything and killed everybody. It killed all the cotton. And all the blacks that were there had to basically migrate right the heck out of there and go up north to factory towns like St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Syracuse, New York, right? So that's when the area fell into real poverty in the 1920s, 30s, and it hasn't really been much ever since. So they tend to build prisons in those kind of places. But the funny thing is, local people don't benefit at all, because everybody who works there lives way over where normal people live, not poor people. You go into a poor community and build a prison, no one's going to live there, and no one's going to spend any money. The only economy locally that I noticed was the Hampton Inn, where all the people who were visiting prisoners at the prison would stay. Like my wife, that was doing all right. There were 2 good hotels in town, and they did lots of business with families coming to visit inmates. But other than that, it didn't revitalize the area at all. Everybody who worked at the prison lived 60, 70 miles away in an enclave of, and they're not that well paid, but they're paid well enough to at least not have to live in a poor place, right? So, but the Yazoo, Mississippi Delta has a great history.
That's pretty cool to have learned the bass in the fucking Mississippi Delta.
And I knew more about Mississippi than the people from Mississippi, in a lot of ways, like the history and stuff. I really prided myself that I got my GED there, Now, I was a bright boy. It's not like I wasn't intelligent, but I didn't feel high school was that important to me way back in 1975. I had a bookstore I wanted to open, so I did that. I didn't finish my high school. I couldn't care less, right? It broke my mother's heart. My mother thought every year for 10 years, even though I was successful in business, she would ask me, when are you going to go back and get your high school degree? So while I'm in prison, and it's never occurred to me that I would ever need to get my GED, they said, Mark, you could get your GED, and we notice you don't have it. And I said, really? Okay, I could get that. And I said, what's involved? And they said, well, it's just like the 125 questions, multiple choice. I said, really? That's all it takes to get your GED? So basically, I flipped through the math book. I worked on it a bit, and I said, okay, I remember all this stuff. And then other subjects, I said, I'll get this, And sure enough, I took the test, and I got the highest mark in the history of the prison, by like no contest. Okay, there you go. But what I liked about it is that I'm a Canadian getting the highest mark in. You're all from America, and half, a good chunk of it's on American history, right? So. Oh, it's valid in Canada. Yeah, any North American GED is good, but like, I got that. I got 2 wrong out of about 125, and I just kind of like the fact that I was. It also says you are in the top 1 percentile of all graduates of the Mississippi State school system, right? So I thought, well, that's fun,
Top
but,
1% in all of Mississippi.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Americans are good. You know what? They have crazy laws in America, but they're good people. Overall, I was amazed, kind of in a lot of ways at the high quality of the convict as well as the guards. Like guards could be mean guys, and they're going to do this for 25 years, but most of them just want to have a decent day. They'll get along with everybody if they can. They'll enforce the rules. They don't like being disrespected. Like if you take advantage of them or take them for granted and start behaving crazy because they've been cool or something, they don't like that. But I found Americans overall, if I judge by my prison experience, I have an improved opinion of Americans. And of course, I got 7,500 letters while I was in jail, and 6,500 of them were from Americans. And I do not include multiple writings. I had one person, Len Preslesnik of Holland, Michigan, wrote me every day for 4.5 years. Wow. Every day he sent me a letter. And he put clippings and cartoons, and I would write him every now and then, but only every 2 or 3 months, probably not even that often. And I would say, I love Dilbert that you send me, and I love it. And he'd send me more of all the stuff I love. And I eventually got many magazine subscriptions from magazine clippings he'd sent me. He would always send me stuff from New York Magazine. I grew to love those clippings, so I subscribed to New York Magazine. And books he recommended and sent me parts of. He'd go to the library and photocopy 20 pages out of Tommy Shondell's biography, highlight the important parts, and send me stuff like that every day. And I thought, hey, I love these things. So I ordered all his books, all the ones he wrote, Tommy Shondell. I got that book. I got eventually all of them. And he would send me clippings about what was going on in Holland, Michigan. I know all about the Rose Festival there, the Tulip Festival, all those craft beer operations that are in Holland. I know way more than any Canadian from British Columbia should know about Holland, Michigan. Right, but it was delightful. He spent over $1,000 in that time in postage alone, and he's a 61-year-old retired guy with no money. He would tell me about his attempts to get rent rebates on, and nasty landlords, like real day-to-day struggle fights, with the man in the establishment, just paying for things and coping with his health, and somehow never failed to send me a letter every day. Right, that's pretty amazing. And he says, you and I have never met, but I have taken you on as my project because what happened to you is a gross injustice. And if this minor amount of attention can in some way rectify what's happened to you, then I am grateful. And every day for 4 years, that guy sent me a letter. Wow. So, I mean, that was pretty amazing. Wow. So that's why I could never feel bad about Americans. And in fact, the 2 worst things to come out of my jail experience are, one, that I had to close Cannabis Culture magazine when I knew I was going away because we couldn't afford to have someone else do it. And secondly, that I cannot go to America for the rest of my life until Jody becomes cabinet minister / prime minister / premier, and then I can go in on her coattails. I just ask her to say, tell him you won't go to America unless I'm allowed in. Tell him that, tell him that, right? You have to meet the president, tell him that. Okay, and then I won't say anything stupid, I promise, okay? And I'll be saying that about every day. Okay, she'll be saying, if you go outside with me to face the public, I don't want any playful banter. I can just say that, no playful banter. I definitely don't talk about what happened between us privately last night, and it's nobody's business. You have to like read me the riot act every day before we walk outside. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. I thought she was somewhere else.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, well,
and,
this was fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear many more stories as the years
It's funny, they'll probably
progress.
come out as you ask them. Normally, they're not going to occur to me. I'm not thinking about jail at all.
No.
Like, it's like
Oh,
a
that's
long TV show that kept going on repeat that I couldn't stop watching, but I don't remember. It's hard to feel it anymore. It's hard to
That's good.
think that I was there, but I was there. And so if you ask me questions, I can recall everything objectively, but I'm not feeling it anymore. I don't. It just seems like a strange dream.
How many counts a day?
How many comic books?
How many counts a day?
Oh, count. Oh, goodness. Stand-up count at 4 o'clock, and then the stand-up count at 10 o'clock, and then there's count at midnight, and then there's count at 2 o'clock, and there's count at 4 o'clock, and then strange enough, 5 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock the doors are open, and man.
6 counts a day?
Well, I guess that many, yeah.
Wow.
But count is the keeping track of people in prison. They're obsessed with it. So, yeah, but that's nice not to have someone say count time, count time. But you know what? I was handcuffed and shackled on the last day I was in prison for the whole trip up to Windsor. And it's funny how you can adapt to anything, like adapt to prison, and it's funny how quickly you readapt, right? Because I got to Windsor. I'm still shackled when I'm in Windsor. They finally come in and unshackle me after my paperwork clears. And then within a few minutes, I'm outside in the real world. Like, surrounded by pot smoke, all these glass eyes looking at me. It's a claustrophobic effect, and there's all these people cheering and going brouhaha and all this wonderful stuff, right? But man, I was just shackled up like a convict out of like Cool Hand Luke for 12 hours up until a few moments ago, and now the world bursts on me, and I've got podium and microphones and stuff. And I thought, this is kind of a peculiar transition, right? Like, I'm speaking to the masses, the national news is watching me, but up till then, I was just some lowly convict, like being pushed around like a commodity. Like, I mean, because you got to do everything in that 12 hours. You have to go pee, you have to go drink your water out of a bottle, which is like impossible, and eat your sandwich, right? And then try and not lose your circulation in your body for 12 hours, you know? And you go on Con Air.
What kind of bag lunch did you get for your last?
Oh, it's always bologna.
Bologna?
It's always
everywhere,
terrible.
everywhere. It's like
I don't know. Like, that's like even
thick
treating it
slab
as
of
food.
margarine.
It's just, you shouldn't do
Yeah.
it. Besides, you're harshing my buzz, bringing back those negative memories. Like, no, you're not really. But it occurred to me, shit, that food was bad, you know? And then if you think about other stuff, you know, like fleas were in the last place I was at, and they'd bite you, and, you know, and beds are all terrible in prisons, right? But you get used to it. Like I say, it's amazing what you adapt to, prison. And then when you get out, as soon as I was in Windsor for 10 minutes, it's like, man, I hardly remember that whole thing. I was just shackled for 12 hours, but it was gone. It's just gone. It just evaporated. And I'm the kind of person that romanticizes everything. I have no traumatic memories. Everything in life is basically grand, including all my arrests and all that. It all had a wonderful purpose to me that gives me pleasure every moment I think about it. So, and same with all my relationships, if we want to use it. I don't remember a single argument. I can't. If you force me to remember, maybe I could recall it, but I can't feel it, right? I don't remember anything negative about any of my relationships. I just remember all the great sex and what a wonderful time it was so much time. And that's all. And I figure that's all that happened, and that somehow we grew apart, right? I remember all those good things because, first of all, it's way more fun to remember all the good sex.
Absolutely.
Second, I don't know why anybody would remember the negative things.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? Like,
No
life is
point in
short.
that.
You only have so much time to think of anything.
Yeah.
There's too much fun to
Might
think
as well
about,
be
right?
fun.
So I only think of all my ex-partners well, and I think of a lot of bad experiences that were very painful at the time. I have a very nostalgic opinion on it. Like when we got raided, and we had very hard times. No money, pay cuts, massive layoffs, all that. But I remember it fondly because we struggled and survived and made good out of it.
Yeah.
Right? Good things came from that experience,
Always.
right? So, and we
adversity.
were going through adversity all the time, and it was painful at the time. And it's funny when I'm in those raids, I'm seeing the whole world in slow motion, thinking, "This is going to be such a fucking disaster," or or "This is really going to hurt." And then they take me to jail, and I'm going, "This is really going to cost a lot of money. And I'm just estimating all the different bad things that are happening. But when you look back on it, say we got through that, you realize we're still quite capable as human beings of
Yeah.
doing great stuff under adverse conditions, right?
Absolutely.
And I read a lot of books on explorers, and some people have endured incredible, crazy stuff, like when they went to the South Pole, right? And they ran it, and they had to go get help. The guy like trekked 800 miles or something over frozen steppe wasteland, and then gets on a boat and goes to a whaling station, in South Georgia, and then brings back help and actually gets them in time. And I'm thinking, we're soft. We're soft by comparison. This is only 100 years ago. This guy trekked like for his friends. He could have said, listen, fuck it. I'm going to die for sure if I help you guys. Not a chance. The guy resolutely walks across the Antarctic continent. He gets into some fucking jerry-made boat he makes, and then he goes 800 miles to the nearest island, which he's actually navigating. He knows how to get there. He finds her. He gets to the wrong side of the island. He has to walk across the island to get to the. And he's already pretty fucking tired, man. You got big fucking hills, and it's still cold, and I'm wet, and I've been at sea for weeks, And nonetheless, the town must be on the other side. So he literally goes, finds the town, tells them, listen, I'm from the Antarctic expedition. You may have heard about us. And everybody is stranded back there, and our boat's munched in the ice floe, so do you mind risking everything and coming and helping us, right? And they actually did it. They got together, they got a boat, they went in, and they estimated it was the right time to go in and get them. They went on the ice floe, got him out, and rescued him.
Wow.
I just can't see people being that tough. Right?
Most people, they won't take a cab to your house for dinner.
Yeah. So anyway, and same with people that went, like I watched, the last movie I saw in jail was a film I think is a great film, and that my father, had he lived longer, would have loved it because it painted the dirty business of war accurately. Saving Private Ryan.
Oh yeah.
That opening scene where the noise just stuns you. You're like, my dad said it was like that. He said the noise was deafening. He said you couldn't think. He said, and if you took time to think, you'd probably die. So you had to almost act spontaneously without thinking anyway. And the sacrifice some people have made, or being sent to war for cannon fodder for bad wars. Because the last visitor I had was a guy who came to see me in Louisiana, and he was a soldier at the Air Force Base, and he just got back from Afghanistan. And he says a lot of the guys are kind of like not right when they come back. He said, I feel fine. He said, but what I want to do is I want to go back to Minnesota, and I want to get post-traumatic stress syndrome added to the medical marijuana legislation. He said because he was from Minnesota, he was stationed in Louisiana, and he wanted to go back to Minnesota and get the medical marijuana legislation Minnesota has, which is limited, to add marijuana use for post-traumatic stress syndrome, because he said so many people he knows from the military are stressed out, and he said that's really going to be the biggest market in post-traumatic stress disorder is military people. So he came to seek my advice on how he should get that done. He said, I'm going back to Minnesota and I want that to happen. So we had a very good meeting about political strategy and who to work with in Minnesota. And I said, no one wants to be against veterans. No one wants to be against soldiers. So if they don't pass that in the first, year of the House that you talk to them, I'd be very surprised. When you tell them they're for veterans and their families so they can cope, because suicide from people who went to Afghanistan, both in the Canadian military, by the way, and the American military, is extremely high and disturbing. Right?
What are they making those young men and women do over there? My God.
It's a primitive culture. American soldiers have fought in completely alien worlds for a long, long time now. Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East. This is not like America. So it's going to have a negative effect on them. The way they see people, how life is cheap in many jurisdictions. I mean, I give the American Army credit. They will spend a lot of manpower, firepower, money to get one guy back. That's the whole thing they've got going for them, is that we take life seriously. Whereas in other countries, there's a tendency to regard life as a much more cheaper commodity. So that scares them there. And the way women are treated, and the way people live in poverty, like, you see real poverty in Afghanistan. Like we think we know poor people, but poor people in Canada don't begin to equal the poverty you could see in a place like Afghanistan, or in tribal areas, rural areas, not necessarily Kabul, but in the rest of the country.
The rest of the country, yeah. Well.
Anyway, thanks for having me on. It's been cool.
Our pleasure, that's for sure. Anytime.
I like your questions because no one's asked me these yet. All the media want to know what my plans are for future, and that's fun to talk about. But that's going to be saturated. I'd like to talk about some prison stories when I get the chance, and asking about them makes me think about them. So.
Well, Jody, kept us very informed all the way along. It was, for me, quite frankly, it was like having you here in a lot of ways. She kept us very close in touch. Yeah.
This place is me, as well as everybody else who ever came here before. But this is my place.
I remember one day we were adding a volcano upstairs behind the big TV, and you got word on how to that should be fastened to that table. You were envisioning it from your cell, I'm sure, and knew exactly how that should be hooked up. And that was really cool to know that you were that close.
Oh, I did want to make a clarification. Actually, it's Jody's business, but it's always going to be my home type of thing. So, just in case she thought,
yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, but she's done a good job. I like Jody being the owner in a way. You know, I like being like, what is it in The Godfather, consigliere, the family advisor.
Yes. Yeah, that's more like it. Yeah, Jody's the boss.
Robert Duvall's character.
Jody's still the boss.
I love the smell of napalm in the movie. Yeah. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Marc, and we'll see you in a bit. Yeah. So there you go. We're gonna tough act to follow, so we're not gonna try.
There's not too many places we can go from there.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Queen of Kush, how about your prison stories now?
What?
Your prison stories.
That would be the only thing that would top it.
I thought I'd
the only thing that would top
take a shot. Well, thanks for coming down and being here with us today.
I love being here.
Thanks to Al, too, for being along. Historic show. Epic. We'll call this epic show. Will we? Is it epic? Awesome or stellar?
Yeah.
Stellar. Awesome.
No, it was beyond stellar. It was epic.
It was epic because we were on 2 different networks. We were on only 2? 2 networks right now. Nice. Well, glad that all you folks, I point down to my left at everybody in Marijuana Man TV because I'm left-handed. Thanks to you folks for being here. We'll be doing lots more on this channel, so keep stoned. And we'll be coming up with some stuff ahead. Thanks to everybody for joining us on Pot TV and in the chat. Didn't get a chance to see the chat too much today, but we never look at it, so nobody should be disappointed.
Good show.
Nice to see all the folks in the house today, and we'll be back next week, God willing, and Delta don't flood. And a Polaroid of us all. All right, peace and Polaroids. And pot. See you next time. All right, I'm done. Oh, no, I'm not done yet. Thanks to Enrico and Tommy for putting this all together. Jeremiah for being here too. And now we're done.